Welcome to the first of 3 videos on the Constitution. The first one will be looking at the roots of the philosophy, the Enlightenment thinking. The second's on the first agreement that was developed, the Articles of Confederation. And the final one will be on the Constitution itself, which we still have today. All right, so let's start with the Enlightenment roots of the Constitution. The Enlightenment, this should be review for you. Coming out of the scientific revolution. The scientific revolution was, a careful observation of nature, and then, people like Galileo and Copernicus, and then being able to explain, why things are happening, people like Newton, and then with Francis Bacon coming in with the scientific method, here's a way that we can know the truth, and through testing and experimentation and the developments of known truth. Out of that came, so we can apply that to the natural world. What about using that same reasonable and logic and apply it to things like economics, religion, government, these kinds of things? And it comes down to two guys at the beginning, Hobbes and Locke, and this should be a little bit of review. Now, Hobbes saying, in talking about government, people are naturally selfish. We are greedy people. We're self-interested. We're always looking out for number one, and that's me. And so therefore, we just cannot govern ourselves. So we must give up our control power to an absolute ruler, an absolute monarch, and who can look after for our best interests. To protect us from ourselves. Now, Locke challenged that and said, whoa. We're not naturally selfish. We are reasonable, rational people. We can learn, we can improve, we can progress, and we are perfectly capable of taking care of ourselves. And the role of government is to protect our inalienable rights or our untakeawayable rights, the rights to freedom of speech, these kinds of things. And the central purpose of government is to protect those rights. Now, Enlightenment thinkers, what other kind of things do they think? And there's 5 main areas. Reason, logic, you can apply, you can, if you don't understand why, well, study it and figure it out. Everything happens for a reason. Figure it out. The natural world, they're very much interested in science and in trying to understand the natural world. This is a time when there's not a lot of understanding of why things happen and how things operate within nature, and they're very curious and very much wanting to understand it. Think about Benjamin Franklin and the story of him playing in the lightning storm with a kite kind of thing. Happiness here on earth. Happiness you can have now and today. You don't have to wait until the afterlife to go up to heaven and achieve true happiness. So that preacher in the church encouraging you to obey God's laws so that you can have happiness is that's not necessarily true. You're not going to have your happiness can happen now. Progress, we can get better, and our liberties, our freedoms are there. A couple other Enlightenment figures, both French, Voltaire, the master of satire. He had a very strong wit and a good pen, and he really knew how to criticize absurdity, to criticize the king, to criticize the aristocrats, and to put them in their place. And any, superstition and intolerance, prejudice, he would attack it, constantly attacking these, and a strong advocate of our freedoms. Got him in trouble a lot. He's in France where there's a king. He does not like what he's saying at all. And then Montesquieu says the idea of separating the different branches of government. Government has 3 branches. There's legislature, there's the executive, which is the monarch or a president, and then there's the judges and the judiciary. And he's saying one should not have too much power over the others. And this idea will be central to the Constitution once it comes out. Now, in America, they've got a unique experience. They're very much self-responsible. They've been looking after themselves for the most part, salutary neglect. Many of them are on the frontier in the wilderness where they have to be self-responsible and take care of you and your immediate family. So they'll have sort of their own twist on their feelings of republicanism and what kind of people should lead. the think leader should be virtuous people and virtuous, honest, and good. And so, well, let's look at all the things that they would say a virtuous person is, because it's right at the heart. Virtue was a word very much in vogue, in fashion amongst these thinkers. Selflessness. It's not about you, it's about us. And so you sometimes might have to sacrifice your life for the greater good. So at this time, to go into government, you would lose money. You wouldn't have the opportunity to participate in business or law. A guy like George Washington gave up 8 years of his life to govern the country, and he very much felt that was a sacrifice. And he quit after 8 years because he wanted to get back to his plantation, to his farm in Mount Vernon. Equality of opportunity. Not that we're all born equal, we're all born with equal opportunity. Plain living, they don't like, showing off your wealth, with expensive fashions and these kinds of things. Not at all. They're men of the people. Honest, morals, sober, and, looking after the public interest. And the people who should lead should be the best of people. You should be a leader because you are smart and you possess all these other qualities that you see before you, and you're a hardworking person and you've earned it, not because of where you were born and who your parents are. That's not going to be. So the idea of an aristocracy is very anathema against American values that they espoused with their sort of brand of republicanism, Enlightenment thinking. All right, so we'll conclude this Roots by looking at how it came about within the Declaration of Independence. A great document, and let's just do our little hip on it. We'll start with our H, the historical context. It was written in the Second Continental Congress, came right after Thomas Paine's Common Sense, which really explained to a lot of people, independence makes common sense. It makes sense. And shortly after, the battles of Lexington and Concord, so blood has already been spilled. And so they really feel that we now need to make the break. The intended audience, the immediate audience, is King George III. This was a document written for him to read. And secondary to the American people, the English people, and then finally, to the rest of the world. This was a document for the world's audience. The point of view, of course, these are Enlightenment thinkers, which we'll see, and its purpose, too, to persuade the American people to support independence and to explain why they're doing it. Okay, so let's have a look at the document itself. We won't read all of it, but much of it. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth a separate and equal station, to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Okay? So we're going to separate, we're going to have independence, and it's only right that we explain to you why. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. Now, John Locke's all over this one, okay? We have unalienable rights, and that government is by the people, for the people, and then when government becomes destructive of our rights, taking away our rights, it is our right, one of our unalienable rights is to create a new government, to destroy the old, create a new one. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, but when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Okay, we shouldn't do this lightly. Like we've thought about this deeply. We're not doing this for light reasons, but there's been a long train of abuses that have been trying to take away our rights and to control us under an absolute dictator. So we need a new government to protect our rights. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. So this goes with the idea that the events that preceded this, that road to the revolution, has been a deliberate plan to take away their liberties. And so this is going to put a stop to it. And then at the end, repeated injuries, let's have a look at them. And so the next step is to list out all of the incidents that they feel that the King of England has been trying to take away their rights as Englishmen and rule them as a despot. And there's the list, and it's a long list. And if you look at the first word, he, that's King George. He has, and he has, for he has cutting off our trade. He has been imposing taxes on us without our consent. Obvious ones there with Boston Harbor and the Stamp Act, these kinds of things. But you can see it's a very long list of deeds. You don't need to go through them all here. And then it sort of concludes, in every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. We begged, we pleaded, we wrote, like the Olive Branch petition. That wasn't the only one. And so his response has always been just more. And so he's a tyrant, by definition, a tyrant. And then it sort of just concludes, and so for these reasons, we thus declare independence of the United States. And then they all signed it, and knowing exactly what the consequences are, and then it was published for the people of the world to read. Okay, so that concludes this Roots of the Enlightenment and looking at the Declaration of Independence. Thank you very much for listening.